Beef jerky might be a common gas station food, but it's actually been around for thousands of years. The truth is, beef jerky is unlike most other meats in a wide variety of ways. From its history to the ins and outs of the production process, here's what really goes into making beef jerky. Beef jerky, or at least its predecessor, has a much longer history than you might imagine. The type of food that eventually became today's modern jerky originated in the Americas hundreds of years ago. Depending on who you ask, charqui, which is the Inca language Quechua's word for dried meat, was first made either during the Inca Empire or by North American Indian tribes who used buffalo meat in their recipes. When the first Europeans arrived in the Americas, they were taught by the Native Americans how to make their own version of jerky, and before long, it had become a favorite snack for European pioneers. During the European expansion into North America, it became valued as one of the most important recipes for explorers and colonizers, since they often had to make do without fresh food. Over the next few centuries, food companies began to produce jerky on an industrial scale, and today, it's consumed by tens of millions of Americans each year. The first thing you need to do when you're preparing beef jerky is figuring out which cut of meat you're going to use. The good news is that, in this regard, the cow is your oyster, since all kinds of cuts can be used in the production process. The bad news is that the store-bought jerky you somehow got for less than $1 probably isn't using the choicest cuts. The golden rule with jerky meat is avoiding fat as much as possible, since using fatty meat runs a higher risk of spoiling your jerky. The leaner, the better, basically. Some of the best cuts of beef for jerky include the eye of round, which is the oval muscle in the rear leg. This cut has little exterior or interior fat, which makes it perfect for jerky. Bottom round, meanwhile, is equally lean and, despite being the least tender of the rounds, produces some of the most flavorful jerkies you can get. The top round and sirloin tip are both decent for jerky production, though the latter tends to be more expensive than the former. For a tougher variety of jerky, you can also use flank steak or ground meat if you want to go the other way and make softer jerky that's easier to chew. Although beef jerky is definitely the king of the jerkies as far as popularity is concerned, you can use pretty much any meat you like to make it. Some of the more common varieties include duck jerky, which has a mild and slightly sweet taste and is often marinated in soy sauce. There's also turkey jerky, which is a staple treat during Thanksgiving, and even fish jerky, which tends to be higher in protein and omega-3 fatty acids. These, however, are practically pedestrian compared to some of the jerkies people have concocted over the years. Take alligator jerky, for example. Often made from alligator tenderloin, this jerky has a mild taste and a firm texture. There's also alpaca jerky for anyone who loves an animal that can make cured meat snacks and mohair sweaters. Or how about kangaroo jerky? It's high in nutrients and often seasoned with pepper flavoring. And in case you didn't notice, it's also made from real kangaroo. Either way, who needs cows? How is beef jerky actually made? The process obviously differs depending on whether you're a huge company mass-producing jerky or you're making it at home for yourself. During the industrial process, the meat is treated so as to remove any bones or connective tissue it might contain before being defatted. One way of doing this involves spinning it in a large centrifuge so that the liquid fat particles separate from the meat. You can also press the meat to squeeze the fat out. At the same time, a curing solution is produced. Water, salt, seasonings, and other additives are sent into a large tank where the solution is heated and mixed together. Next, the meat is either frozen and cut into chunks or ground up using a chopping machine. It's then either dipped into a curing solution long enough that the liquid can fully penetrate it, or the meat is injected with the solution. Either way, the treated meat is then placed into a tumbling device that tenderizes the meat and adds extra quantities of the curing solution. After this process is completed, the meat is molded into blocks and cooled. Finally, the meat is sliced into strips, and these strips are placed onto wire mesh trays, heated up, and dried out. This squeezes out at least 20% of the meat's moisture, and in the end, you have jerky. After the beef jerky has been made, it's then packaged. The best way to store jerky is through vacuum packaging, which ensures the jerky is kept as fresh as possible for as long as possible. One manufacturer, for example, places the meat into a triple barrier bag, fills it with nitrogen, and then seals it. The oxidation process is what makes jerky go bad, so removing the oxygen keeps that jerky fresh. Because vacuum packaging can crumple a bag, many companies use oxygen absorbers to remove the oxygen, rather than actually removing the air and creating an immediate vacuum. These absorbers are essentially small packets that contain iron powder. The powder reacts with the oxygen and begins to rust, which diminishes the amount of oxygen in the air. Many brands of oxygen absorber can reduce the oxygen level in a packet down to less than 0.1%. Nowadays, it's also possible to buy jerky in a resealable package, which is vacuum sealed at first, but can be opened and resealed with a Ziploc. Neat, huh?
We need all natural Alberto beef jerky.
Unsurprisingly, beef jerky tends to contain a few additives and chemicals, and some of these might be pretty bad for you. Chief among these are nitrates. Nitrates are very commonly used in the preservation of cured meats such as jerky, hot dogs, and salami. They're added to these meats in order to give them extra color and extend their shelf lives. While safe nitrates appear naturally in many foods, the artificial ones have been associated with a slew of potential health problems. This is because they set off a chemical reaction that leads to the formation of nitrosamines, a kind of carcinogenic compound that occurs when you combine nitrates and naturally broken down proteins known as amines. And these chemicals can be pretty hazardous. For example, a 2018 study by Johns Hopkins suggested a possible connection between the consumption of artificial nitrates and the abnormal psychological state known as mania. People hospitalized for an episode of mania were more than 3 times as likely to have at some point consumed cured meat than those who had no serious psychiatric issues. Nitrosamines have also been linked to various cancers. Don't go thinking artisanal jerkies labeled as nitrate-free will do you much good either. These jerkies simply haven't used the additive sodium nitrite or sodium nitrate to cure the meat. At some point, nitrates or nitrites were still added. In fact, this has to be done for the meat to be considered cured. Of course, one of the defining features of jerky is the meat, since that's literally all it is. Luckily, these days there are plenty of veggie and vegan-friendly recipes out there, and it's entirely possible to get a kick of jerky without having to chew on an animal at the same time. The process is exactly the same as with beef or any other meat. You slice it, you marinate it, you dry it. But it's possible to use all kinds of substitutes for that meat. Eggplant, for example, is great for soaking up the flavor of the marinade. You could try jackfruit, probably one of the best meat substitutes out there on account of its meat-like texture. There's tofu, of course, for your retro veggies, as well as portobello mushroom or cauliflower if you're veering more towards actual vegetables. Honestly, you can use any number of different vegetables and meat substitutes. As with the flavor of the marinade, it's always worth mixing it up and seeing what happens. You never know what you'll stumble across. Although beef jerky might be one of the world's most popular cured meats, it's by far not the only one. In fact, a huge range of very similar recipes exists in countries across the globe. Take cecina, for example. This Spanish recipe is made by salt curing and air drying beef and dates back to at least the 4th century BC. Just like jerky, it can be made from pretty much any animal, although it mostly uses the hind leg of a cow. There's also biltong, a South African delicacy of marinated and air-dried beef. This recipe was brought to South Africa by Dutch pioneers who needed a hearty food that could sustain them on their journeys inland. Today, biltong is enjoyed throughout South Africa as a snack, so it seems that jerky is anything but unique to the American continent. This snack or something similar has cropped up all over the place, often for the exact same reasons that jerky was developed by the Incas and Native Americans. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more MASH videos about your favorite foods are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.